So, were human Neanderthal children healthy? It's a simple question. The answer is not. It's messy and complicated, just like any real family story. We often picture it like a movie. Two different people meet, fall in love across a cultural divide, and have a child. We wonder if that child was strong, a perfect blend of both worlds. Or we imagine a darker story, a tragic one where the child is an outcast, unhealthy, and unable to fit in. The truth is, both of those stories are probably a little bit right. To get at the answer, we have to look at the evidence. And most of the evidence isn't in dusty bones from a cave. It's inside you. It's inside me. It's in the DNA of almost everyone on Earth whose ancestors came from outside of Africa. That little bit of Neanderthal DNA we carry, usually around 1 to 4%, is the living proof that these children existed. They grew up, they had their own children, and they passed their mixed heritage down through thousands of generations, all the way to us. So right away, we know the story didn't end in complete failure. They couldn't have been all unhealthy. Some of them had to be healthy enough to reproduce. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But that's the big picture. It doesn't tell us about the individual lives. It doesn't tell us about the first child, or the 10th, or the 100th. It doesn't tell us how many of these pregnancies ended in miscarriage, or how many of the children born were sterile, or how many struggled with health problems we can only guess at. The genetic record is like an old book where many pages have been ripped out. We can read the chapters that are left, but we have to infer what happened on the missing pages. Let's start at the beginning. You have two groups of people. Our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, were moving out of Africa. Neanderthals had already been living in Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They were incredibly well adapted to the cold, the landscape, and the local diseases. They were not the dumb, grunting brutes we see in cartoons. They were intelligent. They made complex tools, they hunted massive animals, they buried their dead. They likely had language, they were just a different kind of human, and then our ancestors showed up. We don't know what these first meetings were like. Were they violent? Were they peaceful? Were they curious? Probably all of the above, depending on the specific groups and the specific circumstances. But we know one thing for sure. They saw each other as people. They saw each other as potential mates. And they had children together. This probably didn't happen just once. It likely happened many times in different places over a long period. Now, think about what it means for two separate populations to mix after being apart for a very, very long time. Our last common ancestor with Neanderthals lived maybe 600,000 years ago. That's a huge gap. It's more than enough time for significant genetic differences to build up. Imagine two teams of software engineers who start with the same code base. For 600,000 years, they work in separate buildings, never talking to each other. They each add new features, fix bugs in their own way, and delete old code. After all that time, if you try to merge their two versions of the software, you're going to get a lot of error messages. Some parts will be incompatible, some functions will crash the whole system. That's a pretty good analogy for what happened when human and Neanderthal genomes came together in a child. The two sets of DNA had to work together to build a body, and sometimes they just didn't. This is called hybrid incompatibility. It's a common problem in nature when two closely related but distinct species interbreed. The offspring are often sterile or simply don't survive. Think of a mule, the offspring of a horse and a donkey. Mules are strong animals, but they are almost always sterile. The genetic instructions from the horse and the donkey are just different enough that they can't produce viable sperm or eggs. Scientists see strong evidence that something similar happened with human Neanderthal children, especially the boys. When we look at the Neanderthal DNA that has survived in modern humans, we find it's not spread out evenly across our genome. There are huge stretches of our DNA that have absolutely no Neanderthal contribution. Scientists call these Neanderthal deserts. One of the biggest and most important of these deserts is on the X chromosome. This is a huge clue. The 10th chromosome is one of the two sex chromosomes. Women have two X chromosomes, XX, while men have one X and one YXY. A male child always gets his X chromosome from his mother. This means that if a Neanderthal man and a human woman had a son, that son would have a human X chromosome. But if a human man and a Neanderthal woman had a son, he would get his X chromosome from his Neanderthal mother. The fact that the X chromosome is a Neanderthal desert suggests there was a serious problem with that second scenario. The male children who inherited a Neanderthal, the 10th chromosome, may have been infertile or had severely reduced fertility. The specific combination of a Neanderthal, the 10th chromosome, with a human Y chromosome and all the other human genes might have been a recipe for failure. The software crashed. These boys might have grown into healthy men, but if they couldn't have children of their own, their unique mix of DNA would die with them. Their branch of the family tree would be a dead end. And the problems for males likely didn't stop there. Other Neanderthal deserts in our DNA are found in areas that contain genes related to male fertility, specifically the development of the testes and the production of sperm. It seems that natural selection systematically removed Neanderthal genes from these critical regions. Over many generations, the versions of genes that cause infertility were weeded out. The only Neanderthal DNA that survived to the present day was the DNA that either didn't cause a problem or provided a clear benefit. This is a tough, cold process. It means that for the Neanderthal genes we carry to be here today, many other genes, and the individuals who carried them had to fail. A lot of those early hybrid children were likely evolutionary dead ends, so for many of the first generation children, the answer was probably no, they were not healthy. Or at least they were not successful in an evolutionary sense. There were likely higher rates of miscarriage as the two different genetic systems struggled to coordinate the complex dance of fetal development. A human mother's immune system might have been more likely to reject a hybrid fetus that it saw as too foreign. And the children who were born, especially the boys, faced a high risk of being infertile. This wasn't a smooth, easy merger of two peoples. It was a biologically difficult process with a high failure rate. But that's only half the story. It's the story of the missing pages. What about the pages that are still in the book? What about the Neanderthal genes that did survive? Those genes didn't stick around by accident. They stuck around because they were useful. For the human Neanderthal children who were born healthy and fertile, their mixed heritage could be a massive advantage. This is the other side of hybridization, something called hybrid vigor. Sometimes a mix of genes from two different populations can produce an individual who is stronger and more resilient than either of the parent populations. Our ancestors coming out of Africa were entering a whole new world. They were moving into the colder, darker lands of Europe and Asia. They were encountering new foods, new climates, and most importantly, new diseases. While Neanderthals had been living in these environments for millennia, their bodies and their immune systems were finely tuned to survive there. Having a Neanderthal parent was like getting a genetic cheat sheet for survival in a new land. The most famous example is the immune system. We inherited a whole suite of immune system genes from Neanderthals. These genes, known as toll-like receptors, are one of our body's first lines of defense against bacteria, fungi, and parasites. For a band of modern humans moving into a Neanderthal's territory, the local pathogens would have been a huge threat. A child with a Neanderthal parent would inherit a pre-packaged set of defenses against those specific pathogens. It was an enormous advantage. These children would have gotten sick less often. They would have been more likely to survive infections that might kill a purebred Homo sapiens child. They were healthier because of their Neanderthal heritage. This genetic gift helped our ancestors spread across the planet. But it's a gift with a catch. The same supercharged immune system genes that helped us fight off ancient plagues can cause problems for us today. In our modern sanitized world, with fewer parasites and pathogens to fight, these hyper-vigilant immune genes can sometimes turn on our own bodies. They've been linked to a higher risk of allergies like hay fever and autoimmune diseases like lupus and Crohn's disease. Your seasonal allergies might be a direct and annoying legacy of a human-Neanderthal union tens of thousands of years ago. It was a trade-off. What made a child healthy back then can contribute to making us unhealthy now. The benefits went beyond the immune system. Neanderthals also gave us genes related to skin and hair. We inherited variants that affect keratin, a protein that makes up our skin, hair, and nails. These genes could have helped our ancestors' skin adapt more quickly to the different levels of sunlight and the colder, drier air of Eurasia. Perhaps it made their skin tougher, more resistant to scrapes and cold. Maybe it influenced hair thickness or color. Again, it was a shortcut to local adaptation. Why wait thousands of years for your own mutations to arise when you can get the perfect genes right now by having a child with a local? The story continues with our metabolism. Some Neanderthal genes that have stuck around are related to how our bodies process and store fat. In a hunter-gatherer world, where food is often scarce and unpredictable, having a body that is very efficient at storing energy as fat is a good thing. It helps you survive the lean times. Those human Neanderthal children with a more thrifty metabolism might have been better able to endure a long winter or a failed hunt. They were healthier in that specific environment. But today, with supermarkets and fast food on every corner, those same genes can be a liability. They are linked to an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes and obesity. The health of the ancient child is the root of a modern disease. There are other, more subtle legacies. Some Neanderthal genes influence our sleep patterns and circadian rhythms. Perhaps they helped our ancestors adapt to the different day-night cycles at higher latitudes. Some have even been linked to mood and depression. It's not that Neanderthals gave us a depression gene. It's more likely that a gene that affected brain chemistry in a useful way in the Stone Age has different, less helpful effects in the context of our modern lives, with our unique social structures and stressors. And we even see evidence of adaptation to high altitudes. The Tibetan people who live on the highest plateau on Earth have a remarkable ability to thrive in the thin, low oxygen air. A key gene that allows them to do this was not inherited from Neanderthals, but from another archaic human group, the Denisovans, who were cousins to the Neanderthals. Our ancestors didn't just mix with Neanderthals, they mixed with other ancient humans as well. And in each case, the children of these unions inherited genes that helped them survive in new and challenging environments. So, we have a very complicated picture. Let's try to put it all together. Imagine a group of early modern humans in the Middle East or Europe 50,000 years ago. They encounter a group of Neanderthals. A human woman and a Neanderthal man have a child. That pregnancy has a higher than normal chance of failing, but if the child is born, let's say it's a girl, she might be perfectly healthy. She inherits some of her father's immune genes, which helps her fight off a local infection that kills some of her pure human playmates. She grows up strong, she is fertile, she has children of her own with a pure human man. She passes on those useful Neanderthal immune genes to some of her kids. Now imagine another pairing. A human man and a Neanderthal woman have a son. This child is born, but he carries a Neanderthal, the 10th chromosome. The specific combination of genes doesn't work right. He grows up, but he's sterile. He is loved, he is a part of the group, he might be a great hunter, but he has no children. His unique genetic legacy ends with him. His life was a success, but his genes were not. This process, repeated over and over again for thousands of years, is what shaped the genetic landscape we see today. It was a process of intense trial and error. For every successful line of hybrid children, there were likely many, many failures. The very first generations of human Neanderthal children were probably, on average, less healthy and less fertile than their purebred parents. They were the beta tests. They were working out the bugs of merging two long-separated genetic codes. There was a great biological cost to this experiment, but for the Homo sapiens population as a whole, the experiment was a stunning success. The few children who overcame the biological hurdles gave our species a toolbox of pre-tested, pre-adapted genes. It was a massive boost. It allowed our ancestors to adapt to new environments much faster than they could have on their own. We took the best parts of the Neanderthal genome, the parts that worked with our own biology, and helped us survive and discarded the rest. So, were human Neanderthal children healthy? Some of them were, and those few were a key to our success. They were healthy enough to survive, to have their own children, and to pass on a legacy that is still written in our bodies today, where they carried genes for a strong immune system, for skin adapted to the north, for a metabolism that could weather famine. But many others were likely not healthy. They were the ones who lost the genetic lottery. They were the ones whose genes were incompatible, the ones who were sterile, the ones whose stories ended before they could be passed on. The health of these children wasn't a simple yes or no. It was a spectrum. And where a child fell on that spectrum depended on the random shuffle of genes they inherited from their parents. It depended on whether they were male or female. It depended on which specific human and Neanderthal populations were mixing. And it depended on the environment they were born into. A gene that was a huge benefit in one place could be a disadvantage in another. In the end, we are the descendants of the winners. Our own existence is the strongest proof that at least some of those children were very healthy indeed. The Neanderthal DNA in our cells is not a relic of a failed experiment. It is the signature of a successful one. But we should not forget the cost. It's a story of survival, but it's also a story of loss. It's a story of the many who failed so that the genes of a few could succeed. The health of those ancient children was a gamble, and for us it was a gamble that paid off. The answer is written in our blood, in our skin, in the way we fight disease, and in the very code that makes us who we are. It's a messy, complicated, and deeply human story.